Welcome back to Modern Education. I'm the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford, here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. I'm here in the studio one more time with my co-host.
Hello, it's Emily.
Emily is back in the house. We have another exciting show for you here today on Modern Education. Every Friday at 3 o'clock on 90.1 KZSU, the Stanford student-run radio station, bringing you the noise you need and the news and talk that you need and a little bit of everything that you need, I hope. And whatever time or day you're tuning in to us, whether you are here in the Silicon Valley with us or anywhere across the world, from Texas to Timbuktu to Taiwan, wherever you're at, we want to hear from you. We can hear from you at our 855-723-9010. That is the text message and call in line to the studio here. We might even answer if you call. We will definitely look if you text. And we'd also love to hear from you on the Twitter. What is our Twitter handle?
It's at KZSU.
Yeah, it is at KZSU and at KZSU DJ. We can get those both here in the studio on the DJ monitor. I totally put you on the spot there. You're like, oh my gosh, what is our Twitter handle? Who does Twitter anyway?
Tweet.
I happen to know that my co-host here is an Instagram person, if we're looking at which social media is her preference.
Instagram is my preference. Twitter is not so much, but I have to say, I find what's interesting. My mom is so good. Like, she's all about Twitter.
Your mom follows my tweets. She's amazing.
My first show with you, she tweeted out you.
Yeah.
So she's really familiar.
Shout out to Emily's mom.
Hi,
listening
Mom.
in the audience. I bet she's listening. Probably my mom, too.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, moms. And all the other moms out there, too. We have a nice, exciting show for you today. We're going to be talking about some interesting topics, and we're gonna have our normal tangential banter as we normally do,
as always.
I'm super excited about today's show.
Of course he is. I wonder why.
I think it's because I prepared this week's show. Is that why?
And as well, let's hear it, Ben. What are we talking about today?
Well, thank you for bringing me into that nice segue. That was very kind of you. So today what we're going to be talking about is why math. Now, you may just say, like, why math?
Why?
Let's not do math. How about that?
That was my first.
How about we don't?
Why?
Right?
Why?
Now, I think to get to the heart of this question and to really think about why math, why would we study math, why would we take math all these years in school, what are we really trying to accomplish? I think we first need to step back a little bit and think about what's really happening in school and what is really happening in math class. And I think to do that, for me, I like to take it outside of math altogether. Now, when I got into middle school, this is something that I think everybody in middle school did, at least, in America, if you went to a school around here. I got into middle school. They said, you have to take a band class. You have to try to learn an instrument. And I said, okay, cool. Well, what instrument do I want to play? And of course, this was in the 80s or not. No, this was like early 90s.
Okay.
And Kenny G was big. So
wait. Who's Kenny G?
You never heard of oh, come on. He's like a punchline in movies now. He was so big back then. He's the guy with the curly hair that plays the saxophone. He does like the smooth jazz on other radio stations. Maybe some on this too.
Saxophone, got it. I knew exactly what you're talking about.
The only famous saxophone player that like regular people know if you're not a jazz head or something, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got this saxophone and I started playing in the band, right? And in class, we would just sit around and we would learn how to read music, and we would play simple things, trying to stay in tune with each other. And it was very, systematic and precise, and it needed to fit. And if you don't play in tune and in time with everybody else, it sounds horrible. And this was the experience of learning an instrument.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I didn't find it very compelling. Although,
really?
Yeah. I mean,
what did you not like about it?
Well, it wasn't so much that I didn't like it, it's that there was no room for me to be a musician. And I didn't really know anything about music anyway.
Yeah.
So to just come in and say, this is the way it is, this is the way it should be, this is the way you will learn it.
I mean, it always feels like that when you first go into a classroom, like when you first learn anything, like this is how it is, and you keep up with, like, you can't draw outside the lines, you have to stick to that structure. And I'm thinking for myself, even I played piano for probably maybe 2 years, maybe a bit less, honestly. It was really hard for me. And maybe because this is kind of what I find interesting, of like the parallel between math and music.
So I should get back to that, right?
But I mean, I'm just like thinking it for myself within this of when I was learning piano, it was such a hard like language to learn, like learning how to read music.
Right.
Like you were saying.
Yeah. And, I had a previous guest on the show here who teaches piano and is a trained math teacher as well.
Okay.
And she had this great take on it in that she would just sit the students down and show them some basic structures and chords and then let them go and try to create. And
so that's kind of opposite of what you're saying, like
based
on this like hard structure, go out and create something.
Right. And I think the reason, as yourself and myself and probably many other people who started out doing music lessons when they were young and got exposed to this very systematic, rote way of learning, we didn't stick with it. It didn't speak to us. It didn't get us so excited that we kept up the hours and hours and years of practice that it would take to become a musician, right?
Oh, that's definitely true for myself. I mean, it felt so restrained on what you could do, and you had to do it over and over and over.
Right.
And then it was just the frustration of not being able to get it absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And that's, so let's take this back to mathematics learning, right? If you go into any mathematics classroom within reason, your average classroom, you're going to see basically that same dynamic being set up at every level from kindergarten through college.
Wow, through college.
Oh, sure. Yeah, at least until you get to this sort of the breaking point or the gatekeeper courses. And those are calculus, multivariable calculus, differential equations.
I didn't take calculus.
Sure. Yeah. But you were a journalism major, so that's a little different. You're not required to.
I tested out of my math.
Now, whether or not that's a service to you or not, I'm going to let that go.
It felt like a service at the time.
I believe that, actually. I really do. Now, this gatekeeper level, right?
Yeah.
This level where basically this is the entry to all the STEM majors. And consequently, your major actually plays a bigger role in your future earnings than whether or not you go to college. So it's something along the lines of $1 million difference in lifetime earnings, whether you went to college or you didn't. But if you chose a STEM major in college, it becomes a difference of something more like $3.5 million in lifetime earnings, additional earnings, just dependent on which major you choose within college.
See, when you tell me that, it makes me feel like I chose the wrong major, because I know what I got into is something like, even when I was applying and I decided to go for this major of journalism, I knew I was going for something that isn't really the most profitable. But I kept telling myself, it doesn't matter what the money is. I mean, looking back on it, I wish I kind of thought about it a little bit more, but it's
you could have taken more math classes.
Yeah, I could have, honestly, because that's as well, thinking of that is like where the money is in journalism, math, statistics.
Okay, yeah, that's true, and it's such an important piece of, I think, just living in today's society is having a strong numerical understanding of the world. Because, I mean, even as a journalist or a writer or a blogger or any of these things, you still have to interact with lots of statistics and lots of numerical facts. This is how we as a society have chosen to present facts, is numerically. And if that's the case, then a society that isn't filled with highly numerically literate people are going to be missing a lot of the news and information and the real understanding of even the news they are exposed to.
It's so true. When I read it myself, even sometimes I'll find certain statistics in the way, like, I think when I was learning statistics, what I found interesting especially was how you get these numbers is what matters, not necessarily the face value of that stat.
Right.
Yeah,
so how you calculate it can wildly change what it means or what it represents.
And if you are yourself not educated on that side of it, there's just, you're taking it for the face value of what it is. You're losing, like you're saying, a whole understanding that we could be gaining.
Right. Yeah. And even simple things, when you think of like an average, right?
Yeah.
When you look at an average can be a very misleading number, because you say, okay, like the average person eats, I don't know, 2,000 calories a day or something, right? And you go, okay, well, what does that actually mean? Well, that really just means that some people eat way more, some people eat way less, and presumably most people eat somewhere right there in the middle.
Yeah.
But the reality is that only helps us talk about some mythical average person that doesn't actually exist. And any individual person, you take a little bit more work and start looking at some more of their qualities before you say what you can say anything about them.
Right. And even if you have like one extreme outlier number in that average, it completely changes the value that you end up with.
Right, right. Yeah, they say averages are heavily skewed by outliers, right?
Yeah.
Or they can be pulled away from their true value very easily. And that's, one of these things that we don't ask these kinds of questions enough. And I think it's largely because we don't have the confidence in our numerical abilities, and many of us, to be able to ask the right questions, or to feel confident even that the questions we are wondering about are the right ones to be asking, even if they are.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of questions, I remember talking to my math tutor and just being like, I don't get this.
Right.
And it'll be like, what do you not get? All of it. Like, just explain it to me. And then you'd explain, and it just, nothing would click to where I would fully understand, especially when they were applying. And like, I've only been able to reflect on this fully. Like, and when we were talking about this, this topic.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just like applying for it to math and to real world. It felt difficult. It felt like, why am I using these numbers to something in real world? Because it felt like before I was just taught, these are the numbers, this is what it works. And this, like, the only function that it is for is to understand numbers and like put them into an equation, and then boom, you get something.
Yeah, we treat them as this like weird abstract thing, and we never go, well, wait, what does this actually mean? Right?
Yeah.
What is this serving as a purpose for? And those questions matter.
That life context. I mean, it's typically like, I don't know, there's 3 birds in the tree. One flew that way and 10 miles down that way. I don't know.
No, you were literally just setting up a Pythagorean theorem word problem. One flies due north at 10 miles per hour. The other flies due west at 6 miles per hour.
Yeah.
How far away are they after an hour?
I mean, when am I ever going to be tracking bird movement?
You never know.
Too serious. That was way too serious.
These things could happen. And when they do, you'll be glad that you know.
That is true. That's true.
Okay. So, oh my God. That's probably not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Well, we might be using, I don't know, stones instead of birds.
Okay, so let's back up a little here. So we're talking about what it really means to study mathematics. And sadly, many people have never really seen what it means to study mathematics. They end up getting to those gatekeeper courses, and then they diverge and they go in different tracks and different directions. And, arguably some of those directions are way better for some people than others. And, math is sort of, I think, thought of as a very selective, special group where only certain people get into it and only certain people really can excel.
Yeah. So what does that look like past the gatekeepers, math? What does that look like in the classroom, for example?
My gosh, that is such a great question. I'm really glad you asked that, because the reality is people who have done math up until those gatekeeper courses, what they have done is what I would describe as the analogy of learning to play music by writing scales and learning how to transcribe and learning how to do the sort of mechanical parts of music, but never actually having played music. And this is a take on Lockhart's Lament, which is a famous paper in math education talking about like the problems that are happening. So this is not exactly my analogy, but the idea is that if you spent your whole life writing scales and transcribing chords and things like that, you wouldn't really have an appreciation for what music is. And that's essentially what everyone's done right up until these gatekeeper courses. And after that, it is much more akin to being handed an instrument and a soundproof room and a collection of the finest music that's ever been created and saying, do something with this.
Okay, so it's a lot more free form.
Exactly. Now, my own personal training is probably what I should speak about, if anything, because there are many, many branches of mathematics, which is why it's sort of a thing in the field. And my advisor here, Joe Bowler at Stanford, is big on this in calling it not math, but maths, because there's more than one discipline within mathematics.
See, that itself as well, because Americans call it math.
Right.
In Britain, and pretty much, I think, all of Europe as well, they call it maths.
Sure. And I mean, she is British, so I think she probably carried that over, but she has a good justification for why she says it that way. Yeah. Well, basically, that's what I was just saying, is that there are so many disciplines within mathematics, and there are so many different branches that you could study and so many different fields that you could become an expert in if you were going to study the field, that there is no one single branch. There is no math as a discipline. There's applied math. There's, topological geometry and algebraic topology and all these crazy different fields. I think I just said the same thing backwards, but there probably are two different fields. Yeah. And there's just so many different branches that you could talk to one mathematician one day and another day, and they may have no idea what each other even does, or no clue even what that discipline is that the other mathematician's working on. That's how diverse it is.
Wow. I don't think I even realized how.
Right. I mean, go back to the music analogy, right? You say, oh, I'm a musician. You go, okay, what kind?
Yeah.
Right? Do you play jazz? Do you play classical? Do you play blues? Do you play rock and roll? Right? That's essentially what you'd be talking about if someone says, I'm a mathematician. You go, cool. What kind?
What field? What kind?
What type of mathematician? Because that is a very general thing to say. So anyway, let's say you've gotten past these Weider courses and you're in a place now where you can say, I'm thinking I might study mathematics or not, right? Mm-hmm. Now, to me, this is a very wonderful place to be, first of all. To be even thinking about studying mathematics, I think, means that you are brave. And
definitely
and
brave.
Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And willing to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a very powerful statement to make. And any student who does that is already on the right track and will probably be successful no matter what they choose to study. So I am not actually going to sit here and try to tell people they should study math. I don't know if they should. In fact, there is a long history of mathematicians taking on impossible problems and driving themselves insane. So it's not really for everybody.
Yeah.
I can say that honestly. So anyway, the questions I might think to myself if I was going to start thinking about whether or not me or someone else should study mathematics might be I might start with just thinking, well, why do I want to study mathematics? And that's a reasonable question to ask, right? Some people, if you say they're thinking about it and you ask them why, they're going to say, well, because I love math.
Yeah, that's typically the response that I would think of.
Right. Now, there may be some counterintuitive things you would want to sort of dig out from somebody who has that point of view, because the reality is most people who love math and are thinking about going into the field, maybe not most, but a good portion of them, they love it because of the experience they had pre-gatekeeper courses. They love it because in elementary school, they were very fast at calculations or memorizing timetables.
Well, yeah, because if you don't get it, it just feels like more like a frustration. Like, I'm just frustrated that I can't get this.
Sure. And the people who do get it become very proud of their ability to do these calculations quickly and to be the one that got the right answer first. And these types of things build a certain type of view of what mathematics is. Mm-hmm. They build up this idea that mathematics is something concrete that gives exact right answers and can be reproduced over and over. And you know if you're right or not right away. And that is a validating feeling. The reality is, though, once you get past the transcribing music level of doing mathematics or just rewriting the work that's been done for hundreds of years by other people, which is what we've seen in all of our math classes, at that point, you start to have to be someone who's willing to create. You have to be willing to face a 1,000,000-foot tall wall and find a way over it. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to face an idea that's so big and so powerful that you can't fathom solving it in the beginning, but you know you're still going to take on the battle of trying. And that is, I would argue, an entirely different way of interacting with learning than somebody who loves the right answer, loves getting it quickly, and is proud of themselves for their calculation abilities.
The way that it's set up in the classroom makes it feel that way. So like kind of the thing that I'm questioning at first is like, so is the way that we're learning math and the way that it's taught, like how could it be changed to be more, I'm trying to think, like be more easily accessible to the kids that don't get it so much? Like, should it be taught more free-formed in the beginning? Or is it good to have that backbone of like, this is how it is, and then have that step, like steps further down the line to be like, okay, now we can go to the free form?
It's a valid question. And my answer right off the bat would be, you should never put someone through 12 years of backbone before you let them get a couple of ribs.
That's what I was kind of thinking.
Yeah,
because it feels like it's such a long time. Like just the fact that you're saying even past college, like your core curriculum, like that's when you start to get to the free form. It feels so
it's ridiculous
down the line to even get there.
Right. And it really doesn't need to be that way. Many educators, again, I'm going to go back to my advisor because this is really what she does here. Or a big part of what she does anyway is making open-ended, accessible, and non-prescriptive math problems. These are problems that people can access at multiple levels, problems that have multiple ways to come up with an answer that's satisfactory. Maybe no one correct answer at all exists. And these are the type of math questions that, one, make people feel a lot better about the learning that they're doing because they're actually interacting with and grappling with hard questions that don't have an exact right answer, like most questions in the world. Right? There's usually not a nice, clean, single number, whole digit answer for problems. That's not how life works. And by presenting, and when we present problems that way, we're actually doing a huge disservice to students and to learners in general.
Yeah.
Because when we do that, we're giving the impression that that's what math looks like. Now, when I'm really trying to solve something in the real world, I don't think I've almost ever had a whole number integer less than 20 as the answer. It's just not very likely. And yet almost every problem in a math book has that kind of property to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's disorienting and misleading, and I think it really hurts math students to get that impression that that's what math looks like, because it's not. Now, I totally lost my train of thought. Where am I going here?
Well, it sounds to me like, I mean, what you've explained to me is kind of the idea. What I find fascinating is that the way that I've been taught, I'm kind of applying it to myself. The way that I've been taught, like, it's not my fault that I didn't get like everything. It feels like it's almost been this constructed view that if you don't get that single value, and then you're wrong. Like in math too, like
which diminishes your value as a math learner, right? You say, oh, well, if I'm wrong, then I'm bad at this, and if I'm bad at this, then I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitated towards writing, because there's no right answer when you write. It's like all you need is, I mean, technically, a couple of statements to back yourself up to like get to your conclusion. And like in math, if you don't calculate the numbers right, then you failed your test.
Right. Well, in math, the way it's traditionally taught, let's make that stipulation just because it shouldn't be that way. And when we talk about it that way, it just serves to sort of propagate the misconceptions, right?
Yeah. And I see where you're going with that. I think it's a really good point, even for any listeners listening, to be reflective of the points of how math is taught and why maybe you are so intimidated by those numbers, because it is taught in a very almost intimidating way. Right.
Absolutely. You know, there was a study done where they were looking at trying to just judge people, or they were I've mentioned this before, but they were norming a bias test, and they were just showing people strings of letters and numbers randomly and trying to measure their bias, thinking that they would both be equally no bias because they're just random strings.
Okay.
And they found accidentally that people were biased against random strings of numbers over random strings of letters. And I think that speaks to this sort of depth of association that we have at such a fundamental level that just...
Do you know what the biases were?
Well, the bias, it was being measured on an implicit association test. Is something I'm studying in my work here.
Yeah.
And the basic, I mean, you can't really, the bias was literally saying, like, I like a random string of numbers or a random string of letters.
Okay,
and people found it much easier to like a random string of letters than they did
a
random string of numbers, because the numbers themselves may have been intimidating or had sort of a loaded meaning.
Yeah.
Right? Which I would squarely place on the blame on our education system and how bad most people's experience has been as a math learner. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's something more fundamental to it than that. I really can't say for sure. Now, anyway, let me get back to where I was going with this. So this idea of should we study mathematics, right? Now, my claim is actually this. I've looked at the statistics. There's a great study I think I can look for. I believe it was Georgetown University did this study, and they came up with a whole bunch of numbers about different majors and like what earns what and who does well and what things happen after you do a major in college, right? And one of the things they found, which I'm just going to lay out here, even though I want to protect my discipline and say math is great and everyone should do it. The reality is, if you go through a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and that is as far as you plan to take it, and you don't really, really want to do that major, it is not going to pay you nearly as well as many of the other STEM fields. That's a statistical conclusion that I can't really argue with. So I would say if you want to get a bachelor's in mathematics, there's two ways that I would endorse that. One, maybe three. Let me just work. Here's how I might endorse that, and we'll see how many bullet points I come up with. Right? The first is if you genuinely are curious, you want to be challenged, and you really do want to dig in on something hard that will truly make you grow, especially in your ability to read. Now, that may be a little counterintuitive when I say the best thing that you can get out of learning mathematics, if you're not going to go to a higher level of actually getting a PhD or something similar in math, is the ability to read. Now, the reason why is because math textbooks at the higher level, the upper division, proof-based kind of level, are so dense and so thick with information that they recommend it was really doing you a disservice if you're reading more than one page an hour. Oh, wow. That is the speed that they would recommend you are digesting a math book. Right.
Wow.
And that is because each little symbol, each little hash mark, each little movement of pen to paper means something when you start writing in mathematics. It is taking the language of abstract thought and turning it into symbolic logic on paper. So each one of these little symbols has real deep meaning, which is why it takes so long to sort of work through the symbols.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is, I believe, my reality, I should say, is when you have spent the time to really learn how to read mathematical texts, you can read any text after that, because you've learned how to recognize when you don't understand a symbol. What are letters and words, right? They're symbols. They're ways of conveying meaning. So if you have gone through something that is so dense and so compact with meaning over and over, you will be much better at doing that in any context, I believe.
So is that like one of the similarities that you can say to music, being able to read the symbols of the notes and how that like transfers, how it sounds?
Oh, sure. I think there's absolutely a parallel there, because we're talking about a language, right?
Yeah.
The language of mathematics is the language of logic and abstract thought. The language of music maybe has a similar connotation of being logical and abstract. It's just, a little different, right? You can certainly read a page of music in less than an hour and get the meaning from it, right?
Yeah.
And you could also probably spend an hour on a single page and get more meaning out of it, just like with a math text.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get back to my checklist of an unknown number of bullet points, right?
Okay.
So 1, if you're genuinely deeply interested and you really want to do the hard thing and that's what excites you, go for it. Now, other than that, I personally would not recommend people getting a bachelor's degree in mathematics if they don't have something afterwards that they will benefit from that level of depth and understanding, right? Because the degree itself is not going to pay you the same amount as an engineering degree or a computer science degree or anything else. So if your interest is in the paycheck that comes along with your college degree, there are many other fields within STEM that are probably going to pay you better. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality of the job markets right now. But if you want to go on after your bachelor's degree to do more learning and you want to do more going into different fields, especially I think if you want to switch fields, I think a math degree is probably going to prepare you very, very well for being able to move into other fields. And it's, again, what I was talking about the ability to read very carefully and to digest complicated, dense pieces of text.
Could that be any field?
I would say,
science.
I mean, obviously, like if you want to do medical school, you probably should do a pre-med track, right? I mean, but you want to be a lawyer? I think if you want to be a lawyer, you could do a math major and that would be a great preparation. In fact, there is a very high percentage of acceptance into law school if you got a degree in math. Wow. And that's because they know that math students and people who have studied mathematics are very good at logic. Uh-huh. I shouldn't say very good. They have been trained in how to formally construct logical arguments.
Yeah.
They've been trained in how to break down pieces of an argument and then reconstruct them into a meaningful progression. And these are skills that you could be very good at as a lawyer, or it would be very useful as a lawyer. I would argue same for engineering, computer science. In fact, I would say especially if you want to go into computer science or programming, I would almost argue that you would have a deeper and more foundational understanding of the structures of programming if you started by learning mathematics at a high level, especially set theory and recursion and things of that nature, and then you moved into computer science. I think that would actually serve you better as far as being able to look at the bigger picture. Now, obviously, if you spend years doing coding and syntax, you're going to want to, those are useful skills that transfer, and I'm not going to get too much into that. The point is, I mean, am I on a tangent again? I'm all over the place here.
No, I mean, you're talking about math, and I'm learning a lot. I mean, I think it's really interesting, like basically paralleling numbers to actual language, like logic.
Right.
Setting up these formulas to logic. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a powerful thing to be able to structure difficult thoughts into written word.
Yeah.
And I believe that is really the biggest strength if you are not going to continue with your studies in mathematics that you can get from still studying mathematics anyway. Now, that said, if you plan to go into grad school and other things, I think it could be a very good preparation for a lot of different disciplines, especially sciences, statistical things like that, where you would really want to have a strong numerical background. Now, also, it's just fun. It's so cool to just be able to really.
Fun?
Oh yeah, she looks so doubtful. You should see her face.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I mean,
buddy.
It was fun when I got it, and like the things were kind of clicking, and I got all the answers, and they were right. I'm like, yeah, I can do this.
Yes, and that is the very, very clear picture from most people's experience.
Yeah,
and I think if we want to move past the baseline of the kind of just math that everybody learns for some unknown reason that I still haven't figured out why we learn calculations for 12 years. When we have computers that can do calculations for us since we were like 5 years old, we could have just typed.
So you're suggesting maybe we don't need to learn calculation, like simple?
I am suggesting that if you are focusing on calculations as a skill for a human being, they probably are not going to use it nearly as much ever outside of school as they used it in school. Now, with that said, if schools are looking at numeracy, number sense, estimation, using computers and technology to be able to do bigger and better and more complex calculations because we have that technology now, that, I believe, is the math teaching of the future. That is what math teaching should look like in the next 10 or 20 years. But
do you need to know all that backbone to be able to understand it? Does that make sense?
I don't think you do.
Still don't know what words to use.
I don't think you do. Now, this is not me speaking from research because I am way out of the script here at this point. But what I would say is I think people can always learn things within the context of another reason. And what I mean by that is if you have a complex computer program that is running all your calculations for you, it doesn't alleviate you the need to understand the foundational things that are happening in the program in the first place. And I think when we ask a computer to do a complex calculation for us and we care what the answer is that comes out, we have a much deeper and necessity for understanding what the computer's doing for us.
Yeah.
And I think that is the part that we really miss in schools is when we're saying, oh, people can't use calculators or your cell phones or like whatever. What we're really saying is we don't trust our students to care enough about the answer to understand where it came from. And to me, that is a fundamental flaw to not trust your students because we want them to trust us. If we're the teacher, we are asking for trust every day from our students that they're putting in time and energy to something that is meaningful and worth their time. And if we don't give our students the same trust to know that they'll figure it out and that they will have enough curiosity and intrinsic drive to care about what it is they're solving and to motivate them properly to care.
Trust.
Yeah. Both directions. It is not a single, a one-way street where it's only that the students trust the teacher. It needs to go both ways for learning to truly be valuable.
I resonate with that pretty well. It kind of took me back to high school for a moment.
Yeah.
When I was sitting in my physics classroom and I really did not understand what was going on. And I jumped from a basic level to an AP level physics. And basically this teacher, shout out to Mr. Dunn.
Mr. Dunn in the house.
Yeah. He basically had all this trust in me. He was like, look, if you want to do this, you can. Like, you can push yourself to be able to succeed in this class. I will help you. And I was passing more of the test.
Yeah.
I was doing better. I was asking more actual questions.
It's amazing how much it can encourage us when someone else puts their trust in us, right?
Yeah. Because all along throughout high school, it's like you don't feel like no teacher trusts you. It's just like you have to follow that curriculum and that's that.
It's always top down, right?
Yeah.
Boss tells us what to do, we comply or we don't. If we don't, we get in trouble.
Yeah.
Which is it just doesn't work. I mean, this is pervasive in schools, it's pervasive in business, it's pervasive in our the fabric of our society. And the reality is, I think most people, given enough opportunity and enough resources, will find interesting ways to contribute and they will make meaningful contributions. And when we don't trust that enough to give people those resources and opportunities to make contributions, we're really hurting ourselves on every level. And it's a crazy
so this
thing.
Really this topic about math really isn't just about math. It feels
it's never just about
it's
math.
Not just so it's like, why math, why education, almost
why learn, why do we even try? I mean, if you take the you take the standpoint that everybody's going to die anyway, what's the point of even trying?
Just
okay, let me get back to math here. Can I just run on a topic with you for a minute here?
Go.
Okay. Here's the thing I want to talk about. Are you a math person?
Me personally?
Not necessarily you personally. Maybe the rhetorical question for the audience right now is, are you a math person?
Are you a math person?
Now, just think about what your answer is to that question for a minute. I think almost everybody would be able to come up with an answer. And
got one for myself.
Okay, you got one? Okay, so now I'm going to tell everybody my view on this is yes. You're all a math person.
What?
Now, here's the deal. If you don't feel like you're a math person, that is not a question of whether or not you're capable of doing math. That is a question of your identity connected to math. If you say, I am not a math person, that means you have never created an identity for yourself that math is an important part of your life or that math can serve an important role in your life. And I think that is something that we look at, and most people will say, if I'm not a math person, I'm doing air quotes right here. If I am not a math person, what that means is that I am not a person who is capable of doing math. But I would argue the difference is it has nothing to do with whether or not you're capable. It's the question of whether or not you have identified yourself in a way that would allow you to feel capable. Because we are all...
So you've kind of just changed what capability means, though. Capability means identification.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I am telling you, we are all capable. And the difference of whether or not we say we're capable is really a difference of how we identify ourselves within the world of being a math learner.
Yeah.
Now, let me share a little piece of research with you about this to kind of hopefully drive home how true it is that we are all math people. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the way I'm going to look at this. Now, so you may know, and some of the people, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, may know that I've been a math tutor for many, many years, in addition to being a teacher and many other things, right? I wear a lot of hats, but as a math tutor, I've sat down and worked with hundreds and hundreds of students for years at varying levels, right? I'll tell you a story about one such student. This student came to me taking a 6-week calculus course over the summer.
Oof.
He was on academic probation, having failed it 3 times already.
Oh, no.
And if he didn't pass it in the summer course, which is already way harder and shorter than a normal quarter, which is 10 weeks, if he didn't pass this summer course, he was going to get thrown out of college in his senior year, having taken almost every other course he needed to graduate because of this one course, right?
Wow.
So I sat down with him for 1 hour and watched what he did, talked with him, asked him questions, tried to evaluate what it was that was going on and if or how I could help him.
Yeah.
And what I realized after 1 hour is that he knew how to do calculus. He could pass this course in his sleep. What he couldn't do was basic algebra calculations. He had, 5 to 8 years of missing pieces within the work that got him to calculus. So it wasn't the calculus that was hurting him. He'd taken the class 3 times. He knew the calculus. He could explain every concept to me. I mean, it was like better than most students ever, right? But the reality was he was missing something foundational underneath that was making it very hard to move forward, right? Imagine you have a breathing problem and you're trying to run wind sprints, right? It's not that you don't have the strength or the legs to do the wind sprints. It's that you have some other foundational piece that prepares you for that makes it very hard to be successful. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because him and I spent the summer working together. I can't even imagine how many hundreds or thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, hundreds or thousands of dollars his parents paid me to tutor him for the summer. We worked like 8 hours a day every day for the summer. But he did pass his class. He did move on to be successful and graduate college because of that experience. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because this is somebody who had fundamentally had struggles in math for years and spent a very short amount of time getting tutored and getting help, and was able to turn that around. Probably caught himself up on 5 to 8 years of math that he had missed with 6 weeks of hard work. Mm-hmm. Now, this was a personal experience that I went through, but there's some research that has shown that this is not just a one-time thing that I experienced, but more, it's something that can be reproduced and has been reproduced. Now, there's a researcher who, I think she used to be here and now she's maybe somewhere in Italy or Spain right now, Teresa Ayucano. Great name. I don't know how to pronounce it. She did a study where they gave young kids with mathematical learning disabilities. So these are not just kids that are struggling or having a hard time. They have deep, fundamental, neurologically proven and identified brain struggles that are making it difficult for them to do calculations. Okay. So this is a group of the hardest, worst possible scenario students for learning math.
Yeah.
And these were younger kids, so they are obviously have a high degree of neuroplasticity at that age. But
are we talking like elementary?
Yeah. Okay. I think they were 3rd, 4th, or 5th graders in that range, right? Now, what they did, very simply, they took a not great, not amazing, just a sort of run-of-the-mill one-on-one tutoring program, and they set these kids up with 8 weeks of intensive tutoring. They did it like every day for 8 weeks. 8 weeks is not that long.
Feels long for math.
Sure, it does, but the reality is if you've been doing math for 12 years and you're not confident in it, an 8-week course, or, if you've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah. That is quick.
So they scanned their brains beforehand and then afterwards.
Okay.
And they had a control group to compare to. So this is, a very scientifically set up study. And what they found was in the beginning, before this tutoring program, 8 weeks only, they found large and obvious differences in the way their brains were being activated. Now, how this looks in reality in the fMRI scanner and what's actually happening is that your brain, when you don't know how to do something, lights up in lots of different areas, because what it's doing is it's trying to find a efficient way to process this information.
Yeah.
So it will bounce the information around to many different domain-specific regions of your brain, trying to put together a picture of what to do. Now, the more trained you are and the more practiced you are in learning a topic, say if you're doing mathematics, the more often you're doing it, the more easily your brain is able to go directly to the area that has been trained to process that type of information.
Rather than spiking up all around.
Instead of bouncing all around your brain, it just goes right to the spot and then maybe to the next spot. It's like 2 or 3 areas that were really going to be opportune for processing this information.
Yeah.
So your brain will quickly and easily use those regions and not do this big sort of cloud of excitation in your brain trying to find what to do with the information. Mm-hmm. So the kids who were having trouble, who had the math learning disability, were very much exhibiting this overall activation across their whole brains. And the control group, who were, regular age level proficiency in math, showed a very clean, non-excited state using their brain more efficiently. After 8 weeks, all the differences were completely gone. The kids who got the tutoring had a fundamental change in the way their brain was actually activating and using the information they were trying to process. And we were able to capture this with fMRI and show that there is a fundamental change in not just the behavior and the performance that the students were able to do, but the cortical organization of the way their brains are processing the information they're trying to use.
So how, for example, do I get there? Like, is it intense one-on-one training with someone? Is that like the main difference, that it was one-on-one rather than 20 kids in a classroom?
That's a great question. And there is some evidence to show that one-on-one tutoring has the greatest effect on improvement in performance, specifically in mathematics.
Well, you're able to go to their level.
Yeah.
And
good tutors can.
Yeah.
I think the tutor you were describing earlier was not that good because they just kept trying to explain things to you and you just didn't get it. I would never explain things to you if you didn't get it. I would ask you so many questions that by the time we were done, you got it because you explained it to me.
It sounds like therapy.
It is actually very much akin to therapy. Yeah, absolutely. I never thought of it that way. Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think that's a very good analogy. I think tutoring in many ways has been therapy for people. And
I get it. Oh my God, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, where I was going with this is there is actually a very famous research paper out there called the 2 sigma effect, which basically shows that one-on-one tutoring can give people a 2 standard deviation improvement in their performance in school, in mathematics.
2 standard meaning?
2 standard deviations, meaning they are going from the average. Let's, for example, if they were starting at an average score, they could move up 2 full standard deviations to be in the 95th percentile from the 50th percentile within a short amount of time doing one-on-one tutoring.
Yeah.
And that is powerful, right? So we have evidence showing that of any type of support you can give students, as far as who are behind or who need to improve their scores, one-on-one math tutoring with a qualified tutor is one of the best things that you can get to improve. And I've shared just a few minutes ago also the brain science and the fMRI scans that have actually shown us a cortical reorganization of the way kids with high mathematical learning disabilities, like to the point where way worse than anyone saying like, oh, I'm not a math person, right? These are people who have genuine problems. Mm-hmm. And they were able to reorganize and rewire their brains in a very short amount of time to be able to be successful and show no difference from the kids who had no learning disability.
You're making me feel hopeful for myself.
Really?
Of my own. I'm sitting here like, okay, so I'm not a lost hope. Like, it's not just I can't do math. It's just that I need more, I guess, of another way of looking at math to be able to get it. And more of maybe as well an individualized way, a tutor to get me to understand math. But the way that my biggest question, though, is how do we get that in a public school system where math, like you have 20, 30 kids in a classroom. Everyone's on a different level of understanding. So how are we able to get to an individualized, progress of each kid to be, and like work with that? Because that, especially when I'm thinking like teachers, they're incredibly underpaid. They have so much work to do, let alone, and they're working with 30 kids. How are they going to work with 30 kids alone?
Right.
Like each. That seems like, it seems so nice, but so hard to get to.
Right. And I think that actually points out why, or at least one part of why it's so difficult to get even outcomes for kids, because some kids, their parents can afford to get them a one-on-one tutor through their entire school career. Mm-hmm. And other kids never, ever see a one-on-one tutor through their entire school career. Mm-hmm. And the reality is a single teacher probably can't give that type of attention to every student. But there's hope. I think there's hope.
I believe in the hope.
You know, there are a lot of programs online now that can help people get some extra help.
Online, yeah.
I think there is a lot of room with AI and machine learning to be able to process what kids are doing in real time and use that information in real time as well to actually structure ways for the teacher to be able to spend more individual time with the students.
Okay.
Because if there's simple problems that happen often, a computer can easily catch those and push the student in the right direction.
And say, like, this is how you need, like, you need to work on this area.
What are you having trouble with? Maybe you should try this or whatever. You know, a computer can be programmed to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. If you have the combination of machine learning and AI able to do this processing in real time, which we are very close to having that capability if we don't have it already, the trick is just being able to use the information being collected in a meaningful way. So if we could really, really integrate technology into classrooms, not in a kind of ad hoc, whatever the teacher thinks matters is what gets used in the classroom kind of way, but in a really systematic, nationwide, or at least classroom or school-wide way where the teacher is really getting the support from the technology and the programming and IT and all these other entities that have the ability to really help that teacher be that single one-on-one person for each of those students. Obviously, it would help to lower class sizes, and there's a lot of other pieces that go into this. And, you know, teachers are rock stars, but they're not superhuman. So we definitely...
So we give them technology to become superhuman.
Perhaps, yeah. Now, your point stands, and it is very tough to implement this on a systematic level. So I think for me, given that we are almost out of time, which happens so
surprisingly,
fast, right? Every week that happens, right?
It just flies by.
So to me, I think the best takeaway from this last segment is really just understanding that if you don't feel that you're a math person, it is not because you're not capable of math. In fact, if you don't feel that you're a math person, it has less to do with your ability to do math and more to do with your attitude and your own perception of yourself trying to do math. And since we've seen both personally, I've seen, and in research, we've also shown that pretty much everybody, almost everybody, can do math at the close to, or at least the highest levels, or at least close to it. And that's, I think, something that is, to me, is inspiring and even emboldening, right? Because if you feel that you're not good at something, but you know that it's possible, and you also know that it doesn't take that much to go from way behind to on par or even ahead with a little bit of help, wouldn't that be a good enough reason to ask for some help?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hopeful for the future with the ideas that you've presented, and the idea that like math isn't just something that you get or don't get, because that's how it felt for a really long time.
And that is not just something that you felt. There are also studies that have shown that this is pervasive within the field. Teachers think that way. Professors think that way. It is deeply ingrained within our society that some people just get it and others don't.
Yeah.
And it's an extreme disservice to our ability to truly be members of society with enough numerical understanding to actually interact with all the numbers that are thrown at us every day, at the very least, even if we don't go into studying mathematics.
You're opening up a lot of doors to opportunities that a lot of people just really didn't think of or thought that they could obtain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Oh, well,
thank you for that personally.
And for you out in the audience, we appreciate you tuning in each week to Modern Education. We're here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m., assuming we keep our time slot going into the next quarter schedule. We will be here next week, Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. for your commute home. I am the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford, here with my co-host,
Emily Quiles.
And we will be back next week. So please tune in each week for more Modern Education as we continue to discuss issues in the classroom, issues of parenting, issues of understanding society at large through the lens of learning, education, and everything else that we bring to the table here. So thank you one more time, and we will see you next week right here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford and Modern Education.